All right, so let's kick it off. So welcome everyone to an Autodesk webinar. For the next hour, this is your time to learn, connect, ask questions. Today we have Michael with us, 3D generalist with over 10 years in games and advertising, and of course, a 3ds Max expert. Today he's going to walk us through how he creates 3D environments using Max, like this river environment that you can see here. So now I'll hand over the floor to Michael, and thank you everyone for joining again.
Yeah, thanks, Lucas. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. I'm going to be your host for today, and my name is Michael Shkliaryk, and I'm going to be your speaker. Thank you for coming. I've been in the CG industry for over 10 years now, working in game dev, the product viz, architecture, worked as character artist, as shader technical artist, and now I'm working at Outform Group in the retail segment as a 3D generalist. At our company, we're always trying to push the boundaries of physical with digital and trying to make the best result possible at the shortest time. As you know, CG industry in general is a very deadline-driven space, so it's quite easy to get lost in an endless circle of projects and deadlines. To survive and actually thrive, you need tools that help you move fast without losing control. And for me, that's where Max comes in. And before we dive into the technical workflows, I want to touch on something that's had the biggest impact on my career, and that's personal projects. Why they matter. Personal work is where you get to experiment, fail, and build your identity as an artist without deadlines or client revisions. It's where you can explore crazy ideas, try out new workflow, or just chase what inspires you. And for example, this Japanese village project started as just a creative itch, but it ended up teaching me some new procedural tricks, previously ignored lighting setups, and even led to creating a full free course. It's also the kind of work that gets noticed. Recruiters, studios, and collaborators don't just want to see what you are paid to do. They want to see what you love to do and how you challenge yourself. If you're in a learning phase or stuck in a production grind, take time to work on something that's just for you, even if it's small or rough. Every personal project pushes you further than you think. So using Max, I was able to quickly block out the composition with simple primitives and the modifier stack, then iterate fast with modeling tools. For example, Smart Extrude is an extremely powerful thing in Max. Spline modeling, array workflows. Once the layout was solid, I brought in assets and scatters, and I'm using plugins like Forest Pack for vegetation and Rail Clone or TypeFlow for modular elements, all within a single unified pipeline. And that's where Max really shines to me. Those kind of projects push me creatively, but they also reinforce why it's still my platform of choice. It handles complexity with ease, scales beautifully as the scene grows, and stays intuitive no matter how far I push it. And it's not just about preference, it's about efficiency, flexibility, and control over the process. Like compared to some other industry standards, let's say Maya is amazing for characters, but modeling, especially architectural and environment work, Max is way faster and more intuitive. Blender has come a long way, and it's great for hobbyists and indie devs, but it still doesn't match the plugin ecosystem and the production-ready stability. Houdini is unbeatable for procedural work, but the learning curve is steep, and it's an overkill for many general tasks. Cinema 4D is also great for motion graphics, but for complex environments and geometry-heavy workflows, Max handles them better. And that leads us to speed is everything. The modifier stack alone gives me a non-destructive modeling, which is a massive time saver. The scene organization tools like Layer Explorer and Collections help me keep large scenes manageable, critical when you're working under a tight deadline. One of Max's biggest strengths is its plugin ecosystem. Forest Pack, Railclone, Tyflow, Phoenix, just to name a few. There's also scripts like Sinai, Solburn, or even tiny utilities like Copy and Relink bitmaps. All these expand what Max can do out of the box. Ultimately, for me, Max is familiar, powerful, and dependable. I trust it under pressure, and I've built muscle memory around it. The updates in recent versions like Smart Extrude, retopology, and USD support shows that it's still evolving in the right direction. And finally, the community from Discord to forums makes learning and sharing knowledge super accessible. When it comes to building large-scale detailed environments, 3ds Max offers some seriously powerful features that streamline the process. These are a few core tools I rely on every time. The modifier stack is great as I can build up a complex forms step by step, then go back and adjust earlier stages without breaking anything downstream. This is especially useful for environment work where clients or art directors might request changes late in the game. I don't need to start from scratch. For example, I can combine base geometry with modifiers like bend, noise, edit poly, or FFD, and it's all editable at any point. The modeling workflow is incredibly fast, whether I'm blocking out the landscape or detailing architecture. Tools like Smart Extrude, Swift Loop, and overall the shortcuts in modeling makes it easy to stay efficient. In newer versions, Smart Extrude even supports real-time Boolean style behavior, so I can punch shapes in and out without needing extra plugins. This lets me move from the concept to final quickly, while still keeping things clean and editable. With large environments, managing complexity is half the battle. Tools like Layer Explorer, selection sets, and scene states let me stay organized without getting overwhelmed. I can isolate specific areas to work on, group elements logically, and use Xwraps to split the scene into manageable parts. This keeps performance smooth and the scene scalable, especially important when working in teams or sending files to render farms or game engines. So now that we've covered the why behind using 3ds Max, I want to dive into a real project where I bring all those workflows together, a Japanese village environment, which is also the focus of my free YouTube course. This project became a great opportunity to explore some new procedural workflows and renderings, all inside Max, and to share the full process with the community. The idea was to create a complete environment from the ground up that feels both stylized and grounded, something that could work in games, cinematics, or as a standalone portfolio piece. Uh, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to use the real world references blended with artistic freedom, show how to manage a project like this from start to finish, and most importantly, make it accessible to the community by walking through every step for free on YouTube. The course is broken into chapters so people can follow along, whether they're beginners trying to learn environment design or advanced users looking for workflow tricks. Throughout the course, I emphasize not just the how, but also the why. Why use certain tools, why organize scenes in a specific way, and how to think about long-term asset management. So let's start with where the scene began, gathering references and setting up the first blockout. So once I knew I wanted to create a Japanese village environment, the next question was, where do I start? This phase is all about inspiration, reference gathering, and building a strong foundation before modeling even begins. I always start by looking for inspiration in real-world occasions, especially traditional architecture and rural areas of Japan. At the same time, I pull from movies or video games like Ghost of Tsushima or Sekiro, anything with rich atmosphere, strong composition. This helps guide the tone and visual language of the project early on. Next, I build a reference board using tools like PureRef or just organized folders. I divide images into categories: architecture, props, foliage, lighting, textures, etc. I always make mood boards that show the feeling I want, whether it's peaceful, mysterious, ancient, or modern. This not only helps me, but also helps if I'm collaborating or explaining my vision to someone else. Before modeling, I jump into Max and set up a basic scene. I'm creating a ground plane or a vast terrain to define the overall shape of the land, block out some main areas like where the houses, path, or river might go. I also set up a default camera and rough lighting, even if it's just a skylight, to get a sense of how things will read compositionally. This early blockout stage is super rough, but it gives me direction and lets me test scale, layout, and silhouette right away. Once I've got a visual roadmap and the basic scene setup, I'm ready to move into the first modeling pass and start bringing this world to life. So once the reference and mood boards are done, it's time for the blockout phase. This is the part where your blockout looks like a melted Lego set, and that's totally fine. You lay down the foundation of the scene. It's all about shape, layout, and how lighting flows without getting lost in the details too early. I start by placing the major components of the scenes: buildings, terrain, paths, maybe a bridge or a riverbank. These are usually just simple boxes or primitives. The goal is to define the structure of the scene, not to make everything look pretty yet. This helps me understand the overall volume and silhouette of the environment. It's also a great time to experiment with ideas quickly. Since I'm not invested in the details yet, I can change things easily. One of the biggest priorities here is getting the scale right. I usually drop in a human scale reference early on, even if it's just a standing box figure, so I can judge the size of doors, roofs, walkways properly. At the same time, I think about composition. Where the focal point? What's the flow of the viewer's eye? Are there interesting foreground, midground, or background elements? Good composition in the blockout stage makes the final image much stronger down the line. The goal at this stage is to iterate quickly. I go through multiple layout ideas, moving elements around, trying different elevations or paths, all before committing to details. It's really tempting to start detailing early, but I've learned the hard way. If your layout doesn't work in the blockout, no amount of polish will save it. So the idea here is to fail fast, adjust often, and only move into final modeling once the core layout feels solid. With a strong blockout in place, I have a solid foundation to start building on. So next, I dive into the first modeling pass and start shaping the actual assets. One of the things about managing the large-scale environment and one of the biggest challenges are materials and especially the UV mapping. So because usually environments are having thousands of objects, it's preferable to take advantage of procedural UVs. Things like tree planner map or a regular box mapping is what you're going to use the most. It just seems to be very unfeasible to unwrap thousands of objects and then texture them. So you're trying to take shortcuts where you can, which leads us to procedural versus baked textures. While baked textures are the most efficient in real time and render time, having many objects can lead to hundreds of textures being used to texture them. not to mention the time it'll take to unwrap and paint those textures. The procedural textures like noises, ambient occlusion, and curvature might be heavier, but having one material be adaptable to any geometry you throw in it is going to be a huge time saver. Of course, that also means that you should know how and when to optimize. Out of them all, ambient occlusion is the most heavy on render, so use it moderately. Yeah, now let's dig into some of the features of Max that I'm using almost every single project, and this project was no exception. The array modifier helps you, just as the name suggests. You can have 3 boxes, pick the spline, and that's it. You have a absolutely perfectly good bridge. So you can build your environment, your layout, build things on the fly, and have them being adjustable at the same time. The next one is the latest conform modifier. I believe it's the fastest right now out of all of the DCC. So you can see how I'm conforming the mesh to the landscape. The mesh is having around 1 million polygons, and the landscape has around 4 million polygons or something like this. And you can, it's not sped up, so it's almost real time. It's quite amazing how it's even possible, because I'm using it a lot, almost on every single project. And the next one, of course, the modifier stack. If you're a Max user, you know how procedural this workflow is really, and how powerful it is. You can see how I'm just having 3 splines, you can have an almost finished window. Now, let's talk about lighting. Lighting is 90% of the mood and 100% of the reason your render looked awful at 3 a.m. When you placed and blocked out your scene, it's time to bring the scene to life with lighting. This is where everything starts to play its role. Atmosphere, shadows, all come together as you play with the light direction in reaching the mood. The first step in lighting is deciding on the mood and time of day. For this project, I opted for a natural golden hour lighting with a very soft shadows to emphasize the calm and peaceful vibe of a traditional Japanese village. Although it's not very convenient to have the sun visible directly in your camera, if you expose in your scene right, it will turn out good. I use a combination of HDRI and sunlight to give the lighting directionality. Some fill lights, prop lights to brighten shadows without overpowering the natural look. It's important to tweak lights to match the composition and focal points in the scene. I typically use V-Ray for its flexibility and quality, but these principles also apply to other render engines like Arnold or Corona. I make sure to adjust the exposure in the camera and then match the lighting intensities to feel correct, as this will impact the final feel of the scene. Sorry. Render settings are also always a balance between quality and efficiency. You want to optimize your scene so your renders don't take forever, but still get the visual fidelity you need. I start by adjusting the sampling rates too low and I get too much noise, too high, and the render time skyrockets. Render passes are a huge help. I render out beauty, cryptomate, shadows, reflections, GI separately, so I can tweak them in post-production without having to re-render everything. I also make sure to set up denoising in the render settings to clean up the final image. Sometimes you need to tweak the materials themselves to get rid of the noise, like the trees affected by the sun are coming out very noisy, so tweak the specular intensity to lower the extreme values. This stage really focuses on fine-tuning the settings to get the best result without overpowering my computer with unnecessarily details. Lighting and renderings are some of the most fun parts of environment creation. They allow you to see your hard work come to life in a beautiful polished form. From here, it's just about adjusting the final touches and adding any finishing effects. So don't be discouraged if your project doesn't look exactly the way you envision it. Just trust the process and keep refining it. The understanding of what is gonna work and what isn't comes from experience. The more you do this, the easier it becomes to do the right thing from the get-go. The idea is to keep going no matter what. So lighting can completely transform your scene, but it also can break it if you're not careful enough. So on this slide, I want to cover some common pitfalls I've seen and definitely made myself and how to avoid them. One of the most common issues is exposure balance. If your scene is overexposed, it washes out all the textures and kills the details. If it's underexposed, the scene feels dull and lifeless, and you lose your sense of depth. Not to mention your render times would skyrocket. The key is to set up the camera to control your exposure settings, just like you would in real photography. Shadows are critical for grounding objects and adding realism. The mistake here is either shadows being too short, too soft, or too hard, depending on the light source, or just not thinking about shadow placement in general, where shadow fall can massively affect your composition and depth. Also, consider using occlusion passes or subtle fill lights to shape your shadows more precisely. Noise is another common problem, especially in GI or low light setups. To deal with this, increase your light samples, not necessarily all your render settings, just the problematic lights. Use the denoiser and render in passes so you can control noise-heavy layers like reflections or GI separately. So instead of brute forcing higher settings, isolate the problem and fine-tune only what needs it. If you take the time to test early and often, you'll get cleaner, more balanced renders without wasting hours of render time at the end. So beyond tools and techniques, I wanted to end on a more personal note: how to build a sustainable career in the 3D industry. It's a fast-moving space, but there are some solid strategies that can help you grow while staying inspired. The 3D world is evolving fast, and keeping up with industry trends is the key to stay competitive. Some areas I think are especially worth watching for are real-time renderings and the growing use of AI-assisted workflows. And I know I'm not fond of it either, but it's not going to go anywhere, from texture generation to filling in betweens. Photogrammetry also becoming more accessible for environment creation, and of course proceduralism, whether it's tools like FirstPack, Tyflow, Houdini. Non-destructive workflows are the future. But that said, core skills like modeling, lighting, and composition will always stay relevant. Technology changes, but fundamentals last. It's easy to burn out in this field, especially when you're passionate about what you do. We've all had those just one more tweak nights that turn into 3 a.m. So here's what helped me: time boxing tasks. Give yourself a fixed time for blocking, modeling, lighting, etc. And don't overpolish in early stages. Setting clear scope for the project, because not everything needs to be your hero moment. And making time for breaks and personal inspiration. Even stepping away just to stroll around the block can give you new creative clarity. At the end of the day, your health and your creativity are long-term assets. Treat them with care. Whether you're just starting out or deep in your career, success in 3D is a mix of skill, curiosity, and sustainability. Keep learning, stay inspired, and don't be afraid to take a breath when you need it. Don't underestimate the power of learning by copying. Recreate a game level or film shot. It's like having a mentor without awkward DMs. One of the most underrated but powerful aspects of growing as a 3D artist is a community. Whether you're learning, struggling, or celebrating a win, having other artists around you makes all the difference. I've personally found several Discord communities to be one of the most helpful spaces out there. Servers like 3ds Max or CG Lounge are the places that I go to hang out with other artists, get some feedback, and give it as well. The Max's Discord server is great because it's active, welcoming, and full of incredibly talented people who are always ready to offer feedback, answer technical questions, or just geek out about your workflows. You can hop in whether you're a beginner or a veteran. It's a safe space to grow. Sometimes just seeing what others are working on can be a huge boost of motivation. Some of the biggest breakthroughs in my career have come from getting feedback from other artists. There always comes a time in your career you know how to model, you know how to shade, how to light, render, and everything in between. Tutorials aren't really giving you anything new, so how do you grow further? Feedback. Even if it comes from a completely unrelated person, sometimes just a single word can give you a shift in your perspective or inspire you to do things a bit differently. Ask for help other artists, but don't overdo it, as we all have our lives and work we need to do, so be modest about it. Whether it's a quick tip on UVs, a new modifier trick, or how someone sets up their shaders. Every artist has a slightly different method. Platforms like YouTube, ArtStation, and Discord are amazing for discovering those unique workflows that you can adapt to your own pipeline. Even just getting constructive feedback can push your work further than you'd expect. Being part of a community also helps you staying current with new tools, plugins, and updates. When something new drops in Max, there is usually someone already testing it and sharing thoughts. It's a great way to quickly figure out what's worth learning and what will help you speed up your work. You don't have to figure everything out alone. The community is a shortcut for better results and better experience. So if you haven't already, I really encourage you to get involved. Share your work, ask questions, and connect. The more you give to the community, the more it gives back. And that support can be the difference between getting stuck and leveling up. So as we wrap things up, I want to leave you with an open invitation to join the conversation, get involved, and become part of the larger 3D community. It's one of the best things you can do for your own growth as an artist. If you haven't already, the 3ds Max Discord server is one of the easiest and most active ways to connect with other artists and professionals using 3ds Max. There should be a link somewhere in the chat or in the description to join the server. Whether you're into modeling, shading, animation, or scripting, there's a space for it. You'll also see Autodesk team members pop up from time to time, which is super helpful when it comes to learning about updates or asking questions. Building connections isn't just about socializing, it's about opportunities. Many artists find and land jobs or freelance gigs just from being active in the right communities. You can get real feedback on your portfolio, discover collaborators for personal projects, or even find a mentor who's a few steps ahead of you. And it's not always about asking. Sometimes just helping someone else with a problem helps you grow your own understanding and confidence. Plus, when you surround yourself with like-minded creatives, it keeps you inspired and plugged into what's evolving in the industry. So don't wait until you feel ready. Just jump in, say hi, share what you're working on. You'll be amazed at how quickly that kind of involvement pays off, not just in skill, but in support, opportunities, and motivation. So, final nuggets, I guess. Questions?
Awesome. Great. Thanks, Michael, for the great presentation.
Thank you for having me, guys,
Yeah, of course.
for listening.
I added the link for the full step-by-step course or how he created the project, his YouTube playlist, in the Zoom chat, along with the link for the 3ds Max Discord channel, where you guys can interact with the rest of the 3ds Max community. So I added that there, and now we have plenty of time for questions. So like I mentioned earlier, you guys can drop your questions in the Q&A box. We can get those one by one. So first
Sure.
up here, do you use V-Ray or Corona Scatter to place trees, grass, or other plugins for that type of workflow?
I usually use the forest pack because it's the most advanced tool in the market. Like it's very easy to set up and it's just extremely powerful. But if I'm not able to use forest pack for some reason, the next thing I do is go to TyFlow. And then if the TyFlow fails, then I'm gonna go to Corona or V-Ray scatters. So yeah, it's third.
Nice. And in total, how long did this scene take to complete going through your steps from start to finish?
Based on the amount of videos that I have on my PC, it took me around 180 hours to finish it. So yeah, it's quite a long journey.
A great journey, though. I feel like your work shows just, I think, how important it is to put the time and effort into it. The results are amazing.
Thank
Um,
you.
Another question as well, too. This is from Rob. What is the best way you set your scope for personal projects? Um, Not from a big texturing standpoint, but struggling to get past the gray box of a prop or scene that he's made.
I'm not sure I'm following the question. Can you repeat that?
So what is the best way that you set your scope for personal projects?
You set your scope for the personal projects. To start, I guess, simple. So if it's your first personal project, don't go overboard. Don't think that you kind of magically can finish, I don't know, a massive environment in one go. Start simple, start with some smaller scene, then go up a notch with the next project, and so on.
Great.
I hope that answers the questions.
So how does the scale of a scene affect noise? Generally, this person will model to scale, but when you do an environment this big, are you modeling to real world scale?
Yes, you always try to make things as a real world scale, because if you play around with the scale too much, sometimes it can lead to things look fake. You can, of course, make some things bigger or lower if you need it, but generally you should match the real world scales, especially if you place in afterwards some characters or something that people really familiar with. It might turn out really off.
And do you
And
typically
there was something about noise.
yes, in that question, yeah.
Um, can you repeat the noise question?
Yes, I will find it again. Oh, sorry, I might have lost it. So yeah, how does the scale of the scene affect noise?
Usually it doesn't matter how big is your scene. It's usually about lighting. So the more lights you have, the more noisy it becomes. And then there is also like shader issue or the exposure brightness. So those are all contributing to noise, but usually geometry isn't the factor that contributes to noise.
Perfect. And do you render with GPU or CPU rendering? And what are the final resolution renders? Are they made on your local machine?
Yes, I use a single PC for this. I'm using CPU. And the reason why I'm using CPU is because when you have large scale environments, in my tests at least, GPU and CPU have similar time rendering them, but CPU handles shaders and final quality is a lot bigger. So yeah, I'm using CPU.
Good to know. So this person's Antonio, his main challenge is with environment work today is knowing the limit between distributing vegetation with forest pack or using a grass texture. Do you have any tips for that?
When do you know when to use real grass and when to use the texture?
Uh,
That's the
so
question?
uh, distributing vegetation with either the forest pack or using a grass texture.
Yeah, so the closer to the camera, the more real geometry you're gonna use. So if it's very far away, you can do textures, but if it's like mid-ground or especially foreground, never, never ever do foreground with textures because it's very visible.
Perfect, thank you. And how do you design buildings, for example? Do you just stick to references? And how do you come up with a design which has no real life reference?
A design that has no real life reference. That's a tricky question, I guess. That's a good one. I never actually thought about this, but I guess you try and find as many references as to what you have in mind as possible, and then you kind of take a window from this reference, a rooftop from that reference, and you mix and match those. I guess that's gonna be my answer.
Perfect. Um, is there more questions in the chat I'm seeing as well too? So I'll get to these as well. Do you happen to integrate objects acquired by photogrammetry or 3D scanning, such as rocks, plants, or trees into your models? Or do you prefer procedurally generated objects to populate it?
I usually go to Pixel for their assets. Those are extremely high quality assets. So yeah, I'm usually using those. And if it's something that should have like a very defined shape, then I'm gonna build it from scratch, either procedurally or by hand. But if it's general rocks, vegetation and stuff like that, I'm going for libraries.
Thank you. This might be more of also a question from an Unreal Engine standpoint. Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I just missed it. Did I lose it? Oh, sorry, I think it just, oh, there we go. Sorry, I found it again. So what is the advantage of assembling and rendering the scene fully in 3ds Max versus modeling it in 3ds Max and assembling and rendering it in a game engine such as Unreal Engine 5?
For me, the Unreal Engine and generally the game engines has their issues, and you can immediately see that some scenes being rendered in real time. So for example, the anti-aliasing and shader quality, everything looks kind of a bad quality in Unreal Engine. And if I want to use the full power of Unreal Engine, then I guess I need to render with the path tracing. So then what's the point of using the Unreal Engine? You know? So yeah, I'm sticking with Max. At least until they fix their Lumen and real-time anti-aliasing.
Next question. In the first snow falling scene, I believe you showed an overview of the projects at the beginning of your presentation. Do you remember what program created that effect?
What program created what effect? The
The
snow?
snow effect, yes.
I made it in TypeFlow in Max.
Nice, thank you. I'm just scrolling through some more questions here that I'm trying to find. So how do you see AI affecting 3D modeling workflows in the future? Or currently as well?
I think right now the AI is trying to become more to get its way more into a 3D, right? And well, we have some tools that create models for you. We also have like the automatic retopology and texture creation from AI. And I think those are going to be main kind of areas where AI is going to take over, because you always should check the models afterwards, see if it works good or not for your case. But yeah, in order to know what to look for, you need to know how to model. So just as I said, the base skills are still gonna be needed pretty much.
Thank you, yeah. Also, a quick question as well from my end. You mentioned the influence of the community in your growth as a 3D artist.
Yeah.
Can you share a specific moment or maybe an interaction that like had a really significant impact on your development as a 3D artist?
Significant impact. I met Stefan Hempel. I hope I'm not butchering his. He's a lead 3D artist, 3D generalist at ILM, and it was the first time he gave me a feedback, and I was completely blown away by just how I thought I knew a lot of stuff about 3D, and then at the end I was completely devastated that even like simplest stuff was incorrect. So I guess that was the biggest shift for me, getting feedback from someone.
Nice, thank you. Another, I guess, more back on the technical standpoint. Do you
Yeah,
prefer using HDRI for lighting or the sun and sky system?
I prefer HDRI and sun. So not the very sky, but very sun and the HDRI for the GI. Because in my opinion, the very sky is a little bit, well, it's either not too strong or too much strong. It's also having some incorrect colors at some points of the time of day. So I'm trying, at first I'm trying and placing the very sky, see if it's not working, I'm doing the HDRI with dome light.
Nice, thank you. I guess another question as well too, I guess more related to the technical standpoint as well.
Yeah.
Can you share a favorite technique or tool in Max you believe every artist should know about?
Can you repeat the question? My favorite technical
I guess,
tool?
yeah, I guess technique or maybe a specific feature in Max. I know we've touched on this as well in the presentation earlier on, but I was wondering if maybe there's like one tip or trick from your experience in Max over the years that
Yes,
every artist should know.
using Xrefs, I would say. So you have a lot of different elements in the scene, and when your scene is quite big and everything is in one single scene, it becomes really slow and performance is not so great. So in order to, let's say, you want to animate characters in the same scene, but you cannot really do this because the scene is unworkable. So you do the Xwraps. Those are extremely powerful, in my opinion, and they're very overlooked for some reason by the large community. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing. I guess more related to also now the specifications of your computer a bit. So what are the specs that you're using to kind of help create, some of the projects, personal work that you've done? Is there any specific stuff that you're using that?
Yeah. Um, I don't know if I can show you the details here. Can you still see my screen?
Yes,
So yeah, okay. So this is my CPU, the i9. It's quite old and 128 gigabytes of RAM. That's probably all I'm using. I hope that answers the question.
I think so. I mean, if there's more questions as well, we can always get back to them.
Yeah,
What are the top plugins for realistic environments that you find? I know you've mentioned a few in our talk so far. Are there any go-tos that you have?
realistic. Um, well, yeah, plugins like Forest Pack, Typeflow, and render engines like V-Ray. Those are great, and those are usually what you're going to use the most. But if the result is not realistic, it's probably not going to be because of the plugin. So train your eyes, see the difference in colors and exposures, see how camera interacts with the lighting and environment.
Amazing, thank you. And I'm more on the work-life balance side of things as well too. I wanted to touch on this a bit as well, since you mentioned also, the side of things of, working with the community and different artists, and also just in
Yeah.
general, the different projects that you're working on. Do you have any tips, I guess, for maintaining more of that work-life balance while working on intensive projects? I know some of the experience that you've had in your previous work as well. Maybe you can kind of touch on this for some more, I guess, tips and tricks for.
Yeah, that's a really tough question because work-life balance, at least in CG industry, it's really hard to maintain this because it's an extremely deadline-driven workspace. So you sometimes have like a deadline to the day after tomorrow, and you have so much work to do that you spend in 2 days without sleep, without any rest, just trying to meet the deadline. But the important thing afterwards is to take your time off and to just not touch the PC because afterwards it's your health. You cannot go on like this forever. So you really should take care of yourself. And when people want you to work and you know that you need to work, of course you do your best to meet the expectations, but you also should cherish yourself more, I guess, afterwards. So yeah, it's always a tricky one.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I know it's obviously a career that everyone is obviously so passionate for, and I think it's so important just to hear more a bit like how, your experience in the industry as well, and just kind of maintaining that a bit and helping you become more successful, right? Um,
Yeah.
I think those are all the questions that I've seen on the chat. So thank you again, Michael, for an amazing, amazing presentation. And I hope everyone really enjoyed learning a bit more about 3ds Max today, different environment workflows, modeling tools. Love to see all the comments and people introducing themselves. It's really great to see. But again, thank you everyone so much for joining. It's been a pleasure having you all today. And we'll catch you at the next one. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Bye, everybody.